Okay, here we go. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome again to our Drop Leash Thursday Facebook Live. My name is Laura Hunter, owner of Drop Leash Dog Training. I am here today with Celeste Gagnon, who teaches classes with me at Drop Leash. And today we are going to be talking about how to help fearful dogs. So a little bit different than last week's unit. It is completely different working with a fearful dog in training capacity, and there's a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions about it. So we're here today to talk about those. Celeste, we're going to do this the same way. We've got questions that people have asked, and so I'll read the questions, which will keep me on track with my answers, hopefully.
Okay.
All right.
So, why is my dog afraid? It doesn't make sense for them to be. They're just being silly.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first biggest issue is that it's really hard for humans to understand fear in dogs and exactly what it is. And, that's a logical thing because, dogs are predators with big teeth and they're used to hunting and eating other animals. Like, what could there possibly be in our civilized world that would frighten them? They're certainly capable of protecting themselves and they can do a lot of damage. So why are they afraid? It's interesting because people, it's not just dogs. For 20 years I worked, we ran horse related programs, and people used to say the same thing about horses. How could they possibly be afraid? Look at them, they could kill us. But horses are even more afraid than dogs, and they don't know that they can, it's just a different mindset. So it's misunderstanding animals in general, I think. But dogs don't live in the wild anymore. They live in a safe world supposedly with us. So what is in our world that they are afraid of? And they're afraid of weird, silly stuff. It doesn't make sense. So one huge cause of fear in dogs is evolution. Animals in the wild, and including our dogs, their ancestors lived in the wild, were the ones that were disposed to be afraid of things were actually the ones that survive. So animals that were afraid of heights didn't fall off cliffs. They didn't go near them. Animals that were afraid of anything new or unfamiliar didn't get eaten. If something, another creature showed up in your environment and you didn't know anything about it and you went up to them, being brave, you could have gotten eaten. So fear is actually a default behavior that kept animals alive. And that fear was passed on genetically. So animals that tended to be fearful survived, and they passed on the genetic disposition in other animals to be fearful as well, in their offspring to be fearful as well. So fear is normal for dogs because it was a survival tool. And so even in our civilized dogs, or our domesticated dogs, our captive dogs, fear of novelty is still huge. And there are so many things in our world that are novel for dogs. There's weird sounds out there. There's, all those moving vehicles. Strangers are certainly novel to our dogs. And, there's just so much out there. So I think it's, when in doubt, be afraid. And if you're not afraid, it might kill you. So, here's some modern day examples. I've got a couple of puppies in my programs right now who are all, interestingly enough, totally terrified of garbage trucks. And it's the hydraulic noise on the trucks that they're afraid of, because it's that weird hissing, squeaking sound. So that's a common one. My dog is afraid of the cheese tubes, because when I was, putting cheese in our cheese tubes for treats, there was an air pocket that made a splatting sound, which is, I guess, if your dog is a strange sound. So now she's afraid of anything that looks like a cheese tube. Uh, how a cheese tube is going to get her, I don't know. A common thing that you and I see in the agility classes is dogs that are afraid of the teeter-totter. And people always say to me, my God, it's just a teeter-totter. Why would a dog be afraid of it? But their ancestors didn't grow up with teeter-totters. And how often does a dog encounter that experience where the world falls out from beneath their feet? It just drops all of a sudden. So things that we think are pretty normal are not for dogs, not at all. And it's not even just an evolutionary cause. Genetics and breeding play a huge part as well. And dogs can be born fearful. Fear can be the tendency or the predisposition to fear can be passed on. And I always thought it was passed on through the females. If you had a fearful mother, they could produce fearful pups. But I was actually reading something in the Pet Professional Guild yesterday, and I've got it written down here. This recent research shows that a puppy, even with one parent who has a predilection for fearful behavior, could be the recipient of those fearful genes, even if the other parent is shown to be a stable and normal dog. So now they're saying it doesn't matter whether it's your father or your mother who's afraid. If they are, there's a good chance you could be afraid as well. But I also do know that if a mother is stressed during her pregnancy, she can also produce fearful pups. So it's pretty easy to see that puppies can be produced who are fearful. And I think that is the case definitely with my Maddie dog, who's fearful, because I met her at 3 weeks and she already had issues. We knew she had issues at 3 weeks. So I can only assume that was genetic and nothing horrific happened to her in the first 3 weeks. Although having said that, the third cause is learned behavior in dogs. And so we have a Walks at Work program tonight, and one of the dogs that is in that Walks at Work program is lunging and barking because she is now afraid of other dogs. And perfect example of a learned behavior. I guess they had invisible fence installed on their property. They live in a rural property. And I think they were working on teaching the dog to deal with the fence. And there was another dog on the property who plays with their dog. And the other dog came running over, I guess in a greeting, banged into their dog and knocked her into the electrical field of the fence, and she got zapped. So now she's afraid of that dog. And she's also afraid of dogs in general. So dogs work on associations. So that was a very clear association. The fact that dog showed up in her environment, came to greet her, immediately something painful happened. So that dog predicted that painful experience. So now our dog in our program is thinking I should stay away from that dog because she predicted a painful experience. So it is really easy to see how it can be installed as a learned experience. And there is sometimes a difference in how you can deal with fear, your chances of success in working with it. In the case of that learned behavior, that dog had a lot of padding beforehand with other dogs and playing with that other dog, and they were good experiences. It was a social dog with a good play history with that dog and other dogs. So hopefully we can turn that around because of all those previously good experiences. Whereas with Maddie, my dog, I actually think that fear is built into her DNA. And certainly with Maddie, we socialized her extensively. We did everything we possibly could. It was okay. And then one minor experience with another dog tipped her over, and that was kind of it for her dogs. So there are different reasons and different sort of circumstances, but those are the big three. So and so, those are the causes. But what we really want to talk about today is human misunderstanding about fear in dogs, and I'm hoping today that we can help people understand more about fear in dogs, because it does have a huge impact. So so Celeste, what I think a couple of questions that people normally ask us.
Yeah. So how can my dog be that afraid?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. How can my dog be that afraid of a cheese tube? And these are common sort of things. I can understand the dog being a little startled, but how can it be that afraid? It's really hard for us to understand how it feels to be the kind of fearful that animals are. So if it's in their evolutionary makeup that unfamiliar things could possibly kill them, even something as simple as a cheese tube or another, a strange person could be life threatening. And we're not just talking about, oh, I'm anxious about that, oh, I'm worried about that. We're talking about the intensity, which is hard to understand, because literally with our dogs, it is, I am afraid for my life. I'm afraid of being injured or possibly killed. And that's really hard for people to empathize with, because how many humans put themselves into positions where they are in a life-threatening situation, where the outcome could lead to serious injury or death. Most of us, if people come along and say, hey, do you want to go ice climbing in the Rockies this winter? And we'll say, you out of your mind, I'm going to probably fall off the mountain and kill myself. Why would I do something that stupid? Or occasionally it's come up in conversations over the years, because my husband did once jump on a plane, and most people's reaction to that is, well, you're nuts, you could have gotten yourself killed. Why would you do that? So our tendency is not to put ourselves in those situations, so we don't experience that fear. And that fear, it's not the same as anxiety. I think a lot of human fears are more anxiety related. Anxiety is, there's a difference between fear and anxiety. I learned this in one of Dr. Puckle's webinars. And fear is a specific response to a specific trigger, whereas anxiety is just fear of bad stuff happening. So, as humans, we worry a lot of things. Right now, actually, we worry about, are we all going to have enough money when this is over to survive? People are worried about losing their businesses. We worry about, day-to-day things, but most of that stuff isn't an immediate sort of visceral threat to our lives. Not like we don't expect dogs to, except, we're all worried about COVID right now. We're worried about what's going to happen. But again, that's more, I think, anxiety.
Yeah.
Maybe if we were exposed to somebody who had COVID and we weren't wearing a mask and we found out about that's more of a visceral fear of losing your life. But even that's a little bit removed, I think, from what our dogs fear, because usually fear is a tangible thing right in front of their face. It's a tangible thing. The only So here's a story. I think when I was in my mid 40s, my husband taught me riding lessons, and my whole life was one big fantasy about learning to ride a horse. So he met this woman in a second cup somewhere, and he ordered talking about her horses. And he said, "Hey, my wife's always wanted to ride a horse, So she said, "Sure, bring her up. We'll give her some riding lessons." So I went. I thought it was going to be a wonderful experience. The woman, who was a lovely woman, unfortunately was a female polo player, and in polo, if you know anything about polo, most people who play polo have no fear of anything in life, because it's pretty extreme. So here was, me, my middle-aged 42-year-old control freak, who just, first lesson, got up on a polo horse and off we galloped forest, and we were jumping trees and riding on the lip of ravines, and I was completely out of control, and I was absolutely stinking terrified. And I went back. I went back for many lessons because I really wanted to ride, but that was definitely for me a lesson in what it feels like to be in absolute fear of losing your life, or at least being severely injured, because I was absolutely positive that at any point I'm going to get myself one of those horses, because I had no idea what I was doing. And actually, I had a friend that went with me, and I remember us galloping across a field. Well, it seemed like we were galloping, and she looked over and she said, we're probably gonna die in the next minute. And I said, yeah, we could. She never went back to horses. So I did sort of get my act together, and I went off and found somebody who could deal with it and get back on a horse, and eventually I ended up owning 26 of them and training them, and teaching them to work as therapeutic horses. But in a way, it was good stuff came out of it, because the outcome was that I think when I see the dogs who are frightened and who are scared, I actually have a better, possibly, and I can't presume to know what goes on in dogs' heads, but I'm hoping I can presume to understand exactly how frightened they really are, and how it is that fear of being injured or killed, or having something horrible happen to you. And I think it gives me a bit of an advantage in working with her. And I can try and explain it to people. I think it's hard if you haven't experienced it, but at least I can try and interpret to people exactly what is happening in that moment. So there you go, my fearful story. Anyway, let's move on.
Mhm. If they are afraid, why are they behaving so aggressively?
Yes. So, all behavior is communication. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is, and it's totally understandable that, so dogs have three choices when they're afraid. They have flight, they have freeze, and they have fight. And so if a dog is contained or restrained in some way, we've taken the flight and probably the freeze option off the table, because whatever it is scary, there we go. Whatever it is scaring them is coming towards them, they can escape. So all they have left is fight. And fight, although it seems like a terribly aggressive behavior, is almost always just a case of the dog trying to increase distance between them and the scary thing. So, people look at that surface behavior, and we get calls all the time. Oh my God, my dog is aggressive. People say that to me right off the bat. When I hear that, I know there's a 99% chance that the dog is just fearful, because, to be honest, in this program, I haven't ever really met any dogs who are aggressive just for the sake of being aggressive. But when people see dogs lunging and barking, they look at the surface behavior, and it's hard to think of what is actually driving that behavior. So we have to remember that behavior is how dogs express how they're feeling, and they are just trying to usually increase distance between them and something that's scary. A good example of that is all the dogs that we have in our leash reactive program. You'll see out in the street, they're either afraid or they're frustrated. And in both cases, it's an emotional response that they can't control that is driving that behavior, and that people interpret that. Last summer we had some people that came into our house, and usually Maddie is in the kitchen when we have anybody in the house, and she's behind a blanket on the gate, and she's quite comfortable in there because she has that distance for people. And Maddie likes people, but the initial greetings for her are scary, so she tends to bark. And I remember that day I came in, and she was in her crate, and there were people literally leaning over her crate and she was just going bonkers because they were right there in her space, and right in her face on that. And I said to them, get away from the crate. Oh no, it's okay, we can deal with it. And I said, no, get away from the crate, because you're really upsetting my dog. But it was really hard for them to see that as just her being upset. They saw that as an aggressive dog. And there was a comment made later that night that if they owned a dog like that, they would have had it put down for aggression. So it's so possible for people to completely misinterpret what they see as aggression, but which is really fear. And as I said, I think it's that way. You probably agree with me, Celeste. All the dogs we've seen, almost 99% of the time, I don't think we've ever had a dog in the program who was just aggressive. I know
No.
there are some out there, but I think the percentage is low, really low. So,
Yeah, I mean, the variety of fear levels are different,
yes.
because we'll get some that are harder to work with because they're just so afraid.
Yes.
But I've personally never seen actual aggression for the sake of aggression.
No, and your dog just gave us a beautiful example of that, because
It startled me.
But people would watch her barking out the window and go, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
it's one of those aggressive German shepherds." She's fearful, right?
Yeah.
So that's just her trying to send whatever is outside on the other side of the windows. It's just her trying to send that away. So it's nice to know she's in tune with our Facebook Lives, eh? It was perfectly well timed.
We coordinated that just for this.
That's okay. German Shepherds are really smart. Okay. Next question. What's our next question? I don't have the questions. I just have the answers. I hope.
So I was a little bit behind. Why don't they just get over it? Did we do that?
I think we missed one. Go back about it.
Oh, I don't see any signs of them being afraid.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, and
yeah, that's a good one.
So that's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
Because and I have an interesting example. It's you talking in the leash reactive Zoom class. And so in our at Work class, we talk a lot about people reading the subtle signs of body language in dogs. And we even before we get to that one, usually in puppy class we talk about fear in dogs, because the body language can be so subtle in a fearful dog. And I always ask people in puppy class, in my game Zooms, can you guys give me some examples of body language in fearful dogs? And no one really can. And it's not to fault owners in any way. It's something I had to learn, when I was studying to be a dog trainer, because if you'd asked me before, I wouldn't have had a clue at all. And people miss a lot of those subtle signs. So again, they attribute the behavior to possible aggression, thinking it's fear. I remember the other night in the Walks at Work Zoom, we were talking about how when you're walking Penny, when she has seen something that she's afraid of. And I forget, what was your answer? It was quite remarkable. Something about her ear.
Oh, well, no, her ears perk up, but it's more her. I don't know. She's got a couple different tells, but they're minute.
Yeah.
They're very minute.
I honestly forgot. It was something about her ear rotating or twitching or something like that. And I went,
her ears. Mackerel. I mean, her ears are always up anyway, but they kind of just even become just that touch more vertical.
Yeah,
and they're forward. It's just like almost like a little twitch.
Yeah, and I was thinking, wow, I'm not sure I can spot anything that subtle in my own dog. Dogs are pretty obvious, but like how many owners are going to be able to see something that is so obvious to you, and you've had to develop that sensitivity because you and I both have had dogs who have been reactive for many years. I know, and I probably see those signs in many. I can't think of one just off the top, but you know most owners, if they haven't had a dog who's fearful before, if they've gotten a new dog that's afraid, unless the signs are really obvious, it's really hard to catch those early signs. And it's not it's something, if I was going to say where the responsibility for that would be, I almost think that it would need to come from, it would need to land on dog trainers, because we don't always teach those signals. You don't teach it in a live class when you've got dogs running around anyway. But I do think that we should be, dog trainers should be paying more attention to teaching that kind of stuff to our owners. Certainly, we're doing it now in the puppy program, because in Zooms I have that luxury to do that, and people started asking me, and I didn't realize that people wouldn't know. I took it for granted they would, but they don't. So I think that has to be addressed going forward, I hope. The other thing too is that even if we do see those signs, we do, because humans, and I'm lumping all of us in there, we all tend to interpret from our own perspective. And is guilty. We were watching a bunch of puppies out on the field last week in the social group, and we were running dialogue with them, and it was so silly, And I said to agreed, because they were experienced dog owners. It wasn't their first puppy, their first go around, and we were all saying, "Isn't this great? How we're all standing here anthropomorphizing our dogs?" And it is fun too. But we also have to remember it's not true.
Yeah.
It's very rarely true. So one of the big things, the things we hear all the time when people say, well, my dogs are stubborn, or they're lazy, or they only want to do it on their own time. We're taking the dog out for a walk, but the dog doesn't want to go. It's lazy. Or we want to take it further down the street, but the dog's being really stubborn and digging its heels in. Public service announcement here: if your dog of any age is digging their heels in outside the door of your house, or if you're sitting and refusing to walk once you take them out in the world, there's definitely an underlying emotional issue to that needs to be sorted out. It's not a character trait. It's an emotional reaction to something. And sometimes, in rare cases, the dogs don't display any emotion at all. And an example of that would have been Maddie. This was years and years ago, again, before I got an education in this. She was so reactive, vocally reactive to the sight of other dogs so far away. And then we took all our dogs to an agility trial. This is like a million years ago. And I walked her through this agility trial. There were dogs everywhere, and she was like totally calm. And I remember thinking that day, wow, look, she's gotten over it. We're on the road to recovery. But what had happened was that she was just completely and totally shut down. She was just so overwhelmed with everything out there that she wasn't happy with, that she just sort of gone into a state of learned helplessness. I can't escape. I'm just going to shut down and pretend it's not happening. And I think you came up with another example of that.
Well, because I'm thinking, how when you try to groom your dog at home or do their nails and they're like fighting you the whole way, but they do it so well at the groomer, they just stay still for the groomer. That's an example to me of a learned behavior like that.
Yes, absolutely. Because they, the groomers, groomers are fantastic, but they don't have time to sit there and feed our dogs cheese.
No,
they're making it. So it's just, they got to get the job done, and they're all as possibly as gentle as they can, but still it's a situation for the dog that can be overwhelming and can shut them down. So you're right. And that's why we always say to our people, please help the groomers out by conditioning your dog at home to at least get through part of the process. And that always makes it easier for the groomers, because they don't have time to put the dogs through a counter conditioning process.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
And I'm not saying
Yeah.
that's always the case to the benefit of groomers. They are much faster than us and they know what they're doing. So dogs
Yeah.
are more relaxed sometimes for that.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think if they're fearful to begin with, then often they just want to
Yeah.
pretend it's not happening and move on.
Yeah, they're kind of like kids, you know. I know, you know, my son was always such a calm, controlled guy out in the world. Sorry, Jesse, if you're not listening anyway, Jesse. But at home, he was willing to show me his true feelings and get upset about things
Exactly.
when he was a toddler. You know,
Yeah.
where you take him out and he's okay at home, and it's like, you know, So
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. Oh,
So
and Susan says it also helps the veterinarians, and that's true. At the vet, that happens often too.
yes,
You had an example of that this past year, I think, with one of your dogs
me.
when you brought them to the vet,
Oh,
and
yeah,
yeah,
that's right. Because they had to go in by themselves,
yeah,
and I wasn't worried about Annie or Rosie, but I was worried about Maddie because, as I said, she likes people, but initially she's very fearful of new people, and she would never, you know, but she does bark, and it's not even aggressive. It doesn't sound aggressive. It's more of an anxiety bark, and she went in without me, and I thought, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And they said, no, she's just sitting here in our lap. And I thought, that could be a really good thing, or she could just be shut down. I couldn't tell you. You
yeah.
know, my guess was she just shut down and sort of tuned it all out. So yeah, I'd forgotten about that one. Yeah. So definitely, yeah. And then like how many pet owners in the world would be able to read that? I couldn't read it. I didn't read it. You know, totally didn't
Hmm.
read it. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's what happens. You know, I even remember, because I'm going to relate a lot to this back to the lovely riding experience I had. I was flipping petrified. I remember the last day at that facility, I was sitting on a horse, and I swear to God, the horse was sleeping. And the instructor was actually holding the reins. And I was sitting there, and I'm sure I would probably look perfectly fine. I was trying to listen to her, but in my head, I was just like, I am petrified. This horse is, and this is totally irrational. I'm petrified. This horse is going to wake up. It's going to buck or rear something, and it's going to throw me off and kill me. I just want to get off and leave. But I could not, I was totally frozen in place on that horse. I could not even function to get off and walk away.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess maybe I hadn't thought of that, but now I know kind of what learned helplessness feels like, because that's how I felt that day. But I'm sure I looked really fine, because as a human, I had some dignity and pride. I didn't want to admit that I was as absolutely scared crapless as I was. So, because nobody would have advised at that point. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, there you go. So anyway, let's move on.
So why don't they just get over it?
Oh, yeah. So here's an interesting question for everybody out there. Actually, I'll ask it. I'll put you on the spot, Celeste. Is there anything in life you're totally irrationally terrified of?
No, I don't think there is.
Wow. Well, you're way more
Not
You're
anything
way
that I
more
can
well
think of.
adjusted than I am.
Anxious about, sure, but not fear.
Oh, I'm phobic of moths.
Really?
And yeah, absolutely. Butterflies. I love butterflies. I'm terrified of moths, and I can't tell you
Ah,
why. And I have never gotten over that ever.
that's interesting.
And maybe it's genetic. My mother was terrified of spiders. We used to hear her screaming. And she never
There's
got
a couple
over that
spiders.
either.
Yeah, there's spiders popping up in the comments.
Yeah. Is there? Okay,
Yeah.
good. There's any moths showing up in the no moths showing
No,
up
no
in the
moths.
comments,
No, you're on
right?
your
No,
own.
okay.
You're on your own with that.
But I do know people that are afraid of birds.
Yes,
Too.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe a moth is just a small bird, or a bird's a big moth. I don't know. And I've never gotten over it. And most people, I think, if they think about it, don't get over those phobias. Probably rational. I don't know. So, you know, our dogs don't get over it either. And maybe it's because people don't realize the intensity of the fear. Because I have heard a lot of people say, we're just going to keep doing it. Again, let me go back to the teeter-totter in agility, because you and I have seen dogs become very afraid of the teeter-totter, but people think, well, if we just do it and we keep doing it, they'll get over it. But fear, I don't think fear works that way. And maybe it's because fear of a totter or a cheese tube. And okay, so I'm not saying that they can't get over it. I'm just saying left to their own devices, they
Yeah.
can't get over it. So
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah, so maybe it's because the fears seem trivial to us. Maybe because people think they're dogs and they're not, sorry, as emotionally complex as we are. I don't know. There's a guy out there, a man out there, a scientist. His name is Joseph Ledoux, and we learned a lot about him in the academy. And he studied fear all his life, and has come to the conclusion that I don't know whether it's specifically dogs or animals in general, but he has said that fear is extremely easy to instill in an animal, and extremely difficult to eliminate it. And in fact, he's willing to go as far as saying that in some cases it's impossible to eradicate fear in animals. So not an optimistic outlook, probably not something owners of fearful dogs want to hear about. But you know what? It could be true. Certainly, Maddie. I don't have any expectations of Maddie ever being comfortable with other dogs. Pretty much anybody who knows Maddie and our life knows that she can't even live with the other two dogs in the house, and that's never going to change. We can never change that. I had a horse years ago, a beautiful big Clydesdale, who had an accident in the arena one day. She was tied up with the wall, and she fell, and she was terrified of lead ropes after that. And we worked and worked and worked on it, and got her slightly better. But the interesting thing that happened with her, and it does happen with a lot of animals, instead of growing out of the fear, she actually generalized that fear to other things in the arena as well. So I remember one day she was getting better with the ropes, but somebody left a rope on one of the saddles over on our saddle racks. And she saw it, and then we could not get her near the saddle racks after that. And she generalized to several locations in the arena. I think there was and then there was one on a stool, so she wouldn't go near stools, and the stool was near the mounting block, so she wouldn't go near the mounting block. So it's fascinating to see how animals can generalize to other fears. Maddie, the cheese tube scared her one day, and of course the cheese tube had cheese in it. So several weeks later, I was out in the back field, and I just had a slice of Kraft cheese, in the plastic wrap, and I pulled it out of my pocket and just threw it out on the ground, and she wouldn't take that cheese. And all I can think of is that it was, it smelled like cheese whiz from the cheese tube. Yeah. So we don't even use cheese anymore. The only cheese I can use is the small pieces of, the shredded bags that you get. Yeah, she's kind of okay with that, but she don't go near cheese slices anymore. So I can just assume that was a generalization to that as well. Again, something that maybe we can't relate to, other than, I'll go back to the world again, is that the entire time that I was going through all that fear and anxiety about horses, I didn't generalize the specific fears to other things, but it eroded my confidence on a lot of other areas in life. So, maybe that's part of it. But definitely, I think fear does affect not just the specific trigger, but lots of other areas of their life. Yeah. So, anything so far you want to add? Are there any comments that have come up about any of that? I'm just looking.
Well, I have. There's snakes are also an issue.
That's just smart. People are smart. Snakes can hurt you.
Dale asked a question, but maybe I'll wait and ask it later because I think that it'll come up.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So we're good.
Okay. So there's where are we here? Sorry, I'm just checking my notes. So there was a couple of other things I just wanted to mention, two other things, and certainly not science-based, but it's stuff I learned from that experience, and I see it in the arena with the dogs. And once again, I cannot base this on science. I might not presume to think that dogs think that way, but having lived with one and having seen so many in the arena, I feel pretty okay about putting this stuff out there. And number one is that I'm not sure our dogs completely ever get over it.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly the generalization is kind of a component of that. And if we look at our walks that work dogs again, you know, part of the goal in our program is that the dogs are able to disengage from the triggers. That is the major goal, actually, and focus back on their owners and kind of be okay with it. And we've talked about this before. You get lots of these dogs, and they're great. And you know, people work on it. There's time involved in it, but they get the dogs to the point where they're no longer reacting, and then all of a sudden, one day your dog's walking around and goes off like Cujo.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can probably talk to that more than I can. That's happened occasionally with Penny, right?
Oh yeah, I can count on it
Yeah.
happening every now and then. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting to think about what triggers that, and whether it's a location or a certain kind of dog that triggers, you know, that all of a sudden, my gosh, am I supposed to be afraid again? I know myself, like I obviously got over much of my fear because, as I said, I ended up owning 26 of them,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I certainly a lot of them had to be trained for the program, and I was. It's interesting because I was super comfortable in the arena riding, and I was super comfortable working on the ground with them. Like I had no problems with any behavior a horse threw with me on the ground. But out in the forest, which is where a lot of the scary experiences happened, I kind of never got over it.
Yeah.
I was okay, but if I thought anything was going to happen out there, if my horse spooked or, you know, kind of indicated that they were, oh, I see something, like I was back to being terrified again.
Yeah.
So we see that with our dogs too,
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know. So I think that it's naive of us to think that our dogs are going to be totally rehabbed on fear, unless, as I said before, you get a dog who had great play history with dogs, and it was one experience. So
Yes.
hopefully, you know, he may get over that and go back to playing with that dog and other, and maybe not that dog, but and it might happen. You know, you just don't forget. That's the thing, is that, you know, Celeste, half the times I can't remember what I did yesterday or the day before, but I can very clearly remember every one of those terrifying incidents that I had during those lessons. And I remember sitting on the horse that day, clear as a bell, thinking I was going to die. So, where did I see this? I read this somewhere just recently, and it is from a credible science-based source, that fear causes experiences to be remembered in dogs. So I guess that is true. I'd forgotten about that. I've forgotten that came across one of my Gmails the other day. So I guess their thought is that dogs think I better remember this so I can better avoid it the next time. That was the
Mm-hmm.
theory to that one. So I guess it is easier to pop up again, you know.
Yeah. Well,
So
survival wise, that makes sense.
yeah, absolutely. You never know when you're gonna encounter something that could
Yeah.
you know, exactly. Okay, where are we at? What are we on to?
So, what can we do to help our fearful dogs?
Okay, all right. Number one golden rule priority is, I really do think we always have to make dogs feel safe.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a lot of management, for sure. You know, avoid situations that are going to frighten your dog, at least until you can find somebody to help you. And you know, Celeste, we do a lot of managing with our dogs,
Yeah.
don't we?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And we don't. You know, we are dog trainers, but we still manage, mostly because it stresses them out. You know,
Well, it's also like we can't train them without managing it first.
that's right.
I mean,
That's
to
right.
me, they have to go together if it's a
Yeah.
fear thing.
Yeah, yeah. And, if we expose them to those scary situations, first of all, they're going to practice the behaviors that we are trying to help them control. That,
Right.
again, the reactive dogs, or, the dogs that bark at windows, um, when they practice those behaviors get stronger because they work.
Hmm.
So, whether it's fear or frustration, these are not behaviors we want our dogs to practice, because I don't think dogs feel good practicing those behaviors. They're certainly not in a good place, mentally or emotionally, practicing those behaviors. So, they're only going to intensify because they're working, and so we want to just completely avoid those whatsoever.
Hmm.
And so if your dog gets into a scary situation, your first priority should just be getting out of the situation. And we talk about this a lot in walks at work. People, one of the biggest problems with leash reactive dogs is that other dogs show up in your face, and well-meaning owners, or other people, want to come over. They just need to meet us. They just need to meet me and my dog. And we're all Canadian, and we're all really polite, so we're always trying to think of polite ways that we can get out of that situation, without traumatizing our dog. And I always say, you can't worry about the other person, the other dog. You just got to turn and go. The priority is to get your dog out of the situation, because if you can't, if you expose your dogs to those situations, if you can't get them out of those situations, your dogs are going to lose trust in you, because you are their safety net. You're their only
Yeah.
hope. It's the same thing, very huge in separation anxiety, because of course I'm taking courses in that right now. If you leave your dog too long and they get upset,
Hmm.
they have to know that you're coming back before they get to the point where you're upset. And that's why we work in very small increments. We never ever put the dog over threshold or get them into a place where they're upset, because they lose trust in us and they lose trust in the process.
Hmm.
So, making them feel safe is number one. I turned my back on a lot of people and walked away. Sorry, people, but your feelings, are your hurt feelings. Feelings of being rejected are not as important as my dog not going off, feeling bad. So yeah, number one. Number two, um, and it's frustrating working with fearful dogs. It's hard. It certainly tests our patience in a lot of situations, but we should never ever punish or correct them for displaying those behaviors. um, and I'm talking about growling, barking, lunging, any of those behaviors, even trying to pull away on the leash. um, we see those behaviors, not we, but people see those behaviors if they're not, if they're not knowledgeable about this stuff, and they think we just have to correct those bad behaviors. Those are bad behaviors. If we stop those behaviors, um, then we're going to solve everything. And you and I both know that there are trainers out in the world who believe that as well. And we heard of one situation this week where the dog was forced to meet other dogs. So we have to remember that this is not behavior that is under your dog's control. It's not a they're not deliberate behaviors, they're emotional responses. And certainly people display, what we call bad behaviors sometimes, just because they're emotionally upset. We've all been in that situation. But again, it's scary because dogs have big teeth and we're worried about them doing damage. But really, what they're telling us, and that's it, what they're trying to do is tell us how they feel, which is afraid. And they're just trying to, again, increase distance between them and the scary thing. So you cannot punish an emotional response. Dogs, are emotional responses are their true feelings. You can't punish them. If you add another aversive component to the situation, you're only going to make your dog feel worse, more afraid, and the behavior is only going to increase. You can't punish them for communicating with you. They're just trying to tell you how they feel, and behavior communication. So if we can keep that one simple phrase in our head, that behavior is communication, what's my dog telling me, then I think we're going to handle the situation in a different way. I hope for sure. The next one. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. Don't try. You can't train your dog out of their fear, and certainly you can't train an emotion out of a human. You have to acknowledge that support and understanding is more important than trying to change the dog or correct them. And I'm trying to think of an example. Again, I keep going back to the teeter-totter, but the teeter-totter is the one we see so often. Because we run so much agility and we see it, and the dogs jump on. Sometimes, the teeter drops if people aren't careful, or, if, we haven't got the tables under because, all the dogs are okay, but then a dog comes in and it just, people take it on the teeter and it just happens. And people say, okay, well, we'll do it again. We'll do it again. We'll do it again. They're just going to get used to it. But we know it doesn't. You can't change an emotional response just by asking somebody to repeat that scary situation over and over again. If anything, it's only going to intensify them. And I know that occasionally people have said to me, well, if my dogs are upset out in the world, we can, what I say, what do you do? And they say, well, we just try to get them to sit and we pet them and tell them good dog. It's not going to effectively work, although it's not punishment, that's for sure. But the dog's still sitting there looking at the scary trigger. Just petting them and telling them that they're a good dog is not unfortunately going to change that response. Best intentions in the world, that's for sure.
No, Penny.
There we go. You got her. Good girl. Look at that. She came right back. There you go. There's a dog who's been through the program. To go back to my experience, people are going, people have their dog on the teeters and they're going, the dog's like, oh my God, they're lying down the teeter. I'm terrified. And people are going, come on, you're okay. You can do it. You can do it. You can do it. I can't tell you how many times I was in a riding lesson and the instructor would try and push me just past my comfort zone into a new skill or that I wasn't ready for. And I would kind of hesitate and they go, oh no, it's fine. I have to tell you, if one more instructor had told me I was fine, I don't know what I would have done. Probably gotten off and socked them, because it is the most useless phrase in the world. It totally negates how you're feeling in that moment. I pretty much used to just get off and disappear. If I had somebody pushed me too hard and I got off and told me I was fine, I just found a really good excuse for not going back, either permanently to that person or at least for quite a while. So training isn't the answer, and neither is asking the dog to face their fears, because that's basically what people. That's such a word. It's such a perspective thing, because your idea of the dog facing their fear and being okay with it could be actually putting your dog in a situation where they're so terrorized and over threshold that we've pushed them so far that there's absolutely no hope of facing their fear.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is that people try to in doing so, we see a lot of people luring their dogs. So if they're afraid to go up the A-frame or they're afraid to go across the teeter, people are like, okay, look, here's a reward at the end of this. If you get all the way up or you get all the way across, you're getting a high value treat. That sets, so the dog, in the dog's head, it's like, wow, I really want that piece of liver, but to get to that piece of liver, I have to do something that might be potentially life-threatening. So whoever, for the person who put snakes in the comment, if you want to do a human analogy to that, you've got a guy with a snake on one arm and $100 bill on the other, going, well, if you come over and you take a look at this snake and pet this snake, I'm willing to pay you $100 to do that. It's not going to make you feel any better about the snake. It might just really upset you because you're also not going to get the $100 either. So it does set up an internal conflict. When people want us to meet dogs who look shy or fearful, and not just us, when they want their dog, if their dogs are shy or fearful people, it seems logical to hand the other person food. And so that, if the dog gets there, if they approach, the person could give them the food. That's a really good real life example of what I was just talking about. But it sets up that conflict, and you can almost get a dog who thinks, oh my God, I really want that food, so I'm going to go there and get the food. They eat the food's gone, and all of a sudden they look up and realize, oh my God, I'm standing there with the person I was terrified to go and see. And, they get stuck in that situation. Doesn't go well because they can't get out of it. So, if people want us to meet their dogs and their dogs are afraid, I understand what they're doing. They want people to think that they want the dog to think that people predict good stuff, which is totally reasonable. But what I do is I throw, I'll take the cookies, but I will always throw past the dog. So the dog never is pressured into approaching me. I'm just, here I am, great cookies. They're going over your head. Look, you can go further away from me if that is your choice. I need to know you have that choice and you are comfortable with that. So that works. And then the dogs think, oh, well, they are predicting good stuff. Maybe they're okay. Maybe I can, move towards them. I still keep throwing. They always have the choice. I still always throw away. I always throw past. So they always have that choice. So we do a lot of that. And that's important for, you to do in every situation with a fearful dog. Give them time and give them space, and that's really super important. Celeste,
yes,
you're going to have to hold the fort for 1 second, because believe it. Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. I had to switch my phone just before this started, and my phone is about to run out of battery. So I will be gone for about 15 seconds. Just get my phone charger. Hang on, people. Sorry.
All right. Well, I don't want to jump ahead because then she's going to lose her train of thought. There we go.
It is so easy to lose my train of thought. Hang on. Plugging in. Plugging in. Give me 1 second to plug in. I'm so sorry, everybody.
That's okay.
Hang on. Sorry. I'd hate to disappear. Scott would not be at all happy with me for disappearing in the middle of a Facebook Live. All right.
We'll just keep our fingers crossed that we don't lose the camera feed.
No, we're good. Okay. We're good. I'm plugged in.
All right.
That should work. Hang on. Let me just make sure. Okay. I am hoping that works. Okay. Yeah. So definitely they need time, and they need space, and they need choice. Choice is the most important thing.
Yeah.
If a dog chooses to leave a situation because they're uncomfortable, and certainly Maddie does it all the time, and she knows that she can. And I think that makes situations easier for her because she knows that she always has the choice to leave.
Yeah.
I took the choice for myself to leave those sessions because I was overwhelmed, but our dogs can't make those decisions for themselves. We have to, well, they can, but we have to teach them and show them that they can't make those decisions. We can't pressure them into changing an emotional response. We have to respect it, and we have to let them be at work at a level at which they're comfortable, and not over threshold. So the thing is, when you're dealing with an emotional state, not a behavior, you can't train it. You can't reinforce it. You can't suppress it. If you do any of those, you're gonna lose your dog's respect, and you certainly can't push them over threshold. That's like such a big no-no. So there are science-based methods in which you can work to reduce your dog's fear of whatever it is. Um, there's counter conditioning and science-based processes. They've been proven to work. Counter conditioning is you set up a scenario or a situation in which whatever your dog is afraid of predicts good stuff. Dogs learn by making associations. They can change their emotional response through association. If you do it in the correct way, if your dog sees a dog from a distance and your dog's okay, they're not over threshold, and the appearance of that dog predicts great stuff, you can eventually change your dog's emotional response to that. And we've seen it. We've seen it with body handling, with strangers. It's harder than some situations are harder than others. Sound situations are tough. We'll talk about that in a second. So eventually you work at. It is a process in which you need, I think, professional help. Please don't go on YouTube and look up counter conditioning and follow the first one you see, because Celeste and I did on YouTube one day watching counter conditioning, didn't we? And we were like, oh my God, that is so not right. Because stuff just gets thrown out in YouTube. Find yourself a qualified trainer who understands and has some education in how to do counter conditioning, because it's not rocket science, but you need to do it the right way, or you can actually make your dog more afraid. The other process is desensitization, where you keep your dog under threshold and you gradually expose them to scary thing, whatever it is. They use a lot in separation today, but again, you have to know what you're doing so that you don't make the dog worse. So that's more about desensitization, actually teaching the dog to be okay with obviously fearful experiences. So you can see that would be a very delicate process. If you do have a fearful dog, please do find a trainer that can help you with that, and don't go off and try it on your own. The other thing I will just mention briefly before we finish the day is that meds, behavioral meds are wonderful things for dogs. I think Dr. Susan is out there listening, isn't she? Back me up on this, Dr. Susan. And I have had several conversations with people lately about behavioral meds for dogs. We were actually talking about it in my Monday night class the other night, and these were people who didn't have, I just gave them a hypothetical, and they all had sort of they admitted they had a knee-jerk reaction to, oh my God, I don't want to put my dog on meds. But if you have a dog whose quality of life is completely affected by fear, putting your dog on a behavioral med, even for short term, can at least help the counter conditioning process and counter conditioning desensitization to work, because it helps your dog feel better and they can think. Dogs who are always in a state of stress and always going over threshold can't think about what's going on in their lives. They can't respond to things as well. And stress has physical ramifications for dogs. So we have a lot of dogs in our program who are perfectly happy, lovely dogs who are on behavior meds, and that's why they're happy, lovely dogs. And there aren't side effects. There are very rarely side effects, So if you can find a vet who can prescribe and help you work to find the right combination, that's also a good thing to consider. If you try counter conditioning and desensitization, which are the gold star sort of games, and they are not being successful, then it is time to talk to your vet about meds. For the first time, we've gone over on a Facebook Live. Yeah. We've gone over our hour. I'm so sorry. Sorry, go ahead, Celeste.
Scott says we have a few minutes if you want to answer a couple questions. So we have a couple good ones.
Okay. Is there anything you wanted to add to any of that before we go?
No, I mean, I guess if you want to do more of a physical comparison to the pain, to the anxiety, or the meds for this kind of behavioral anxiety or fear, think about it as like an injury. If you're in pain, you can't do rehab without,
Yeah.
so you can't expect anybody to work through something without something to help with take the edge off the initial issue.
Yeah. That's actually a brilliant analogy. That's exactly what it is. Exactly
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah.
Celeste. That was great. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that one. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any questions?
Yeah. So we have Dale's question, which kind of works with what we just talked about. Do dogs really need to have interaction with other dogs if they are fearful of dogs?
well, that's just in my house for sure. No,
it's the case.
no.
Yeah.
And both you and I can attest, because we've talked about this, is that we both talked about the fact that we probably feel worse, the humans, because we think, oh, our dogs are missing this, or we can't take them there, to a certain, we can't expose them to a certain activity in their life. But honestly, and Dale can answer his own question probably, because he has I know Dale and Maverick. I think Maverick and Penny and Maddie, all three are fearful dogs. I think they all have totally wonderful lives and they're super happy dogs. I think we feel sometimes that they may be missing out. I know from a point of view, I wish Maddie could still play with the other dogs because she used to have fun doing it. And, it's certainly easier in our life. But then I look at her and I sort of whack myself upside the head and I think, yeah, she's pretty totally happy not playing with them. So yeah, I really do. I think in the case with Tuk Tuk, where Tuk Tuk was super happy playing with dogs and then had that experience, I'm hoping to Tuk Tuk back to playing with other dogs. I think that's a little bit different because it was a one-off type experience, and It was a dog who was super happy with dogs. But our dogs are what they are, and they're really fine being what they are as long as we don't expose them to situations where they get upset. I think it's perfectly fine. I really do.
The other question, which I think is a good one that we get asked a lot, is can the dogs feed off of our fears?
Yeah, totally. Totally. I think, well, I'll let you answer, Celeste, because I'm pretty objective about Maddie these days. I don't get wound up about Maddie, but I'll let you, because you're in Cornell and you're into dogs every day, and you're always when you're out walking, situation is tenser for you than it ever is for me.
I think that if you are kind of worried about something happening or you're on guard for things, your dog feels it. I mean, I don't know if they feel it emotionally necessarily, but they definitely feel you grabbing that leash.
Yeah. And actually I'll add to that because I was talking to one of my Walks at Work groups last night, a wonderful group, and not all of them are wonderful actually, but they actually made a point of saying that they felt more confident. One of them said, she said, I've kind of been avoiding dogs, and she said, I was just said to myself the other day, I'm just going to do it. I got this. I got the tools. We're going to do it. And she said they had the dog was great. No problem. Didn't go off on the other dog. And that there's an addition to make there. And the thing that happened for me with the horses is that if the dogs and the owners have the tools to work with, because we give the dogs tools too. We say to the dogs, here, you can do this instead of this. Once I was able to get enough tools in my toolbox to be confident working with my horses, I was okay. And my Walks at Work people are okay too, because we give them the tools and the technique, the confidence. But it takes time, and they have to have those. That you have. I don't think you can do it by yourself. I don't think owners can do it by themselves. I think they need professionals again to give them the techniques to work through it, because owner confidence and dog confidence are definitely intertwined. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So that's all the questions. Nope. The rest are just a list of things that people are afraid of.
I can't wait to read the list.
We might have to we might have to have another conversation about about just discussing human fears.
Yeah, I want to go see if anybody added moths to the list besides me. I'm feeling kind of like a loser on this one. So, okay, well, we are done then, and I hope people learn something from this. Certainly, if you have any other questions or if there's anything you want to talk about, if you have a fearful dog, we are certainly happy to help you with that. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. We hope we'll be back next week. We don't have a topic for next week. So if any of you are listening and you want us to talk about it in particular, throw a topic in the comments for us. We're always happy to have inspiration. So thank you, Celeste, for being here today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And please, everybody, stay safe and have a good week. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Yeah.